At one point in time, Time Crisis was the creme de la creme of arcade light gun games. Its slick time-based objectives, multiple boss encounters, and duck and cover mechanisms were unheard of at the time. And for a while, the series enjoyed its reign as the undisputed arcade champ. But oh, how things change.
Let's do this.
In Time Crisis 4, the US military has hatched its next defense plot. About 1 billion of them, in fact, in the form of biological weapons dubbed terabytes. Keeping all of them in one place, however, proves to be easier said than done, as a European terrorist front, known as Wolf, manages to pilfer the little critters to use for their own diabolical ends. If you haven't already guessed by now, you and a pal are assigned to clean up the government's mess with bright orange GunCon in hand. Oh, and a white dude with dreads tags along too. Let's face it, good stories have never been Time Crisis' forte. It's always been more about action-packed arcade thrills than its meager attempts at fleshing out a compelling storyline. Nothing has changed here.
A bunch of annoying little flies.
As a balance to the lack of a compelling story, Time Crisis 4 introduces the new Complete Missions mode, which retroactively fits the arcade option with background scenarios. It's a sober attempt at beefing up the game's disjointed narrative, but the bland dialogue and writing do little to puncture the surface of the game's ludicrous plot.
Those things, it's like they're from another planet. Could they be the top-secret weapon the terrorists are after?
In an age where a good console first-person shooter is a mere stone's toss away, the series has stretched its legs in an effort to win back some of its fans. Touting old-school fun on a next-gen platform, the combo seems auspicious, but some things are better left in the past. As with most of the Time Crisis games, the main arcade mode hosts 3 levels divvied up into smaller substages. Designed to beat on your lunch break, it's a brisk adventure to say the least. To supplement this, Time Crisis 4 on the PS3 introduces a few other modes to lengthen the experience. Running and gunning through the game's default arcade setting unlocks the Crisis Mission mode, which includes various challenges like eliminating swaths of enemies with limited ammunition, sniping far-off targets, and taking out hidden enemies with a single bullet. For short bursts of gaming, there's also the minigame mode, a series of speed and accuracy tests. The most prominent feature outside of arcade mode, however, is the aforementioned Complete Missions mode, which discards the game's rail shooting fare for a full-fledged first-person shooter using the new GunCon controller. It's not really light on modes, but it lacks any sort of online functionality. Gunslingers who have taken down the arcade version with a few quarters can just as easily breeze through the arcade mode in a single sitting, and the various mini-games and challenges are mere cannon fodder to keep itchy trigger fingers busy. Even the Complete Missions mode, which at first seems like one of the game's biggest features, ultimately ends up being a big disappointment. The levels are large and uninteresting to play, and the AI is about as flat and responsive as their arcade counterparts. In addition, a significant portion of the game intersects with the original arcade mode, and total completion inevitably simmers down to a relentless hamster wheel of trying to one-up your best score. Unlike most other shooters that utilize a shoot-or-be-shot mentality, the Time Crisis series employs a defensive cover-based system where preservation is just as important as speed. While safely tucked away, players can rotate between a limited supply of machine gun, shotgun, and grenade launcher ammo to use in certain situations. It's all standard issue compared to other shooters, but welcome nonetheless. To mix things up, the game introduces a few scenarios where you can turn between screens to stave off multiple waves of enemies. The few instances that call upon this mechanic are frenetically fun, but there are too few of them. Then there's the FPS mode. Moving and shooting is performed concurrently on the GunCon 3 peripheral, with movement being dictated by the left analog stick and the camera by the right. The various buttons littered around the GunCon 3 also come into play, controlling functions like reloading, jumping, crouching, and zooming. When coupled with the duck and cover system, this sounds like an enticing addition, but it doesn't quite work out that way. The duck and cover system is inexplicably removed from this mode. The basic controls are unaccommodating for a first-person shooter, as trying to negotiate between turning the camera and manually aiming the gun at the same time is just too much. The idea was solid, but Time Crisis 4's FPS mode is little more than a pale imitation of the console shooters out today. It moves far too slow, and the controls are limited and clunky. A year ago, Time Crisis 4 was a pretty decent-looking rail shooter. Now that it's on the PS3, not so much. The blocky character models and stiff animation are well below what the system is capable of, and yes, the red gunshots still look like huge polygonal blobs. Luckily, the game's audio package is a little more merciful on the senses, but not by much. The soundtrack chimes in at the right times with the bravado of a Hollywood action movie, but the laughable voice work is only good for a few chuckles.
What are you trying to do? Where's your patriotism?
What good is patriotism?
Time Crisis is the undisputed champion of arcade rail shooters. Considering how irrelevant the genre has become, that's not exactly glowing praise. We admire the attempt to bring something new to the series with the FPS mode, but its execution is so poor that it's made irrelevant. Time Crisis 4 is a dinosaur riding on nostalgia. If you can't get enough of these types of games, then rent it, beat it, return it. For this series, time is starting to run out.